Hi, my name is Shadi Atia, professor at Liège University in Belgium, and I'm going to talk today about Usability Testing II. I previously talked about usability testing in a previous presentation giving an introduction, and today I'm going to go more into specific details with a focus on ISO 9241/210. This presentation is part of a series on qualitative research methods that you can find in the playlist on my YouTube channel, and I would like to invite you to look at previous videos, and it's very interesting to learn about how to do usability testing through this series in relation to other methods related to qualitative research. As we started this series earlier, I would like to say that the qualitative research methods are mainly focused on techniques related to systematic reviews, content analysis, observation, in-depth interviews, focus group, and as you can see, 2 videos on usability testing. This is the second one in this series. So let's go and start with our presentation. Now, usability testing is not a kind of research that you can call it desk research, desk or documents research. It is more a population research, which means that you will need to have people to interact with them, because the whole idea about usability testing is to interact between a computation or between a solution or a product and the humans, which in this case allows them to test or allows the researcher to test this interaction. So it's a population-based research, and the presentation audience are mainly people who are looking to develop a solution or a prototype and need to test the user experience for validation. So this can be part of any research project or a master thesis or PhD project. The goal of the presentation is to introduce designers to research and researchers to the ISO 9241-210, provide practical advice on metrics to collect analysis techniques to follow and results validation techniques of usability testing based on this ISO standard. Now, what will be the content of the presentation? I'm going to talk about the overall structure of the ISO standard, how are users defined, the tasks and goals that will be measured for usability, what will be the environment, and then the 3 famous metrics: efficiency and effectiveness and satisfaction, and finally wrap up with a conclusion. Now, usability testing, just to give a little word, we mentioned before that we are talking here about qualitative usability testing. In this sense, it's an indicative method, and in this sense, we are looking at subjective input from users regarding the tested tool or solution. Now, we are not looking here for conclusive usability testing, because if it was, in this case, a conclusive test, so we will need to do it within the quantitative research realm involving statistics and involving large samples of respondents. Now, when do we do usability testing? It's mainly done during the user-centered design process. So we must be in a design process for a product, for a prototype, for a solution, and we would like to have the feedback from the potential users during this user-centered design process. When we talk about the product that needs to be tested, I'm talking about solutions, software, web packages, application guides, and so on. And the main actors that will conduct the usability testings, in this case, in the context of today's presentation, are researchers, designers, or engineers. This is the audience that the presentation is catering for. Now, it's very important to talk about the different types of usability testing. Since we are talking about qualitative usability testing, I'm focusing here on formative usability. So I'm looking to guide the design process, take place as early as possible with my tests. It happens iteratively, so I can repeat my test several times with a limited number of users, and definitely I'm looking for qualitative results to inform the design or inform the development of my product or prototype or solution. On the opposite, just to keep you informed, even though it's out of the scope of this presentation, summative usability is looking to make final judgment and is looking for good comparative studies with large number of users, and this sense qualifies it to be a quantitative result. Here is more when we compare products or when we are looking at end stage of design comparison for certain solution, product, or services. So As I told you before, there was a presentation on usability testing number 1. I talked in detail about the two approaches, the formative and summative, but again, I have to repeat, we will focus in this presentation on the formative usability testing. Now let's have a look at the ISO 9241. Well, this standard is giving a context of the use of how to do usability testing. It's defining 6 main elements: the user, the tasks and goals that need to be tested, the environment where the usability testing will take place, and finally the 3 major metrics that the usability testing in this sense will be focused on: effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. Well, let's start with the first element, users. Users. We can have different users who will test my application or test my solution or prototype. It can be the direct user, it can be a tester, it can be an informant, or even design partners. So it is up to you to decide which of those 4 types of users will evaluate your product. And it's very important to be specific early on to define which of those 4 has the major contribution or the most relevant contribution in relation to the development or design development phase of the solution. Now, when we look at the sampling, how can we sample those different type of users who will test the interface or the solution? We can say that, first of all, we need to do a sampling, and the sampling should aim to identify key informants. The goal here is the breadth of the understanding. We want to understand better, to have more meaningful understanding on the relation, interaction, and so on with the solution. And we are not looking here for representativeness. So this is important to mention. As I said also earlier, we are looking here to limited size of testers. The rule of thumb to decide how many users, it can vary from 5 to 12 normally. The saturation theory here is very helpful, because once I reach saturation, if saturation occurs, I can stop with the little number that I have already. So saturation occurs when additional information no longer generate new understanding, and sometimes some usability testing can end up having 2 or 3 testers, especially when you are in an early design phase where we want to have fast and rough feedback, and then you go back to design process to optimize and improve your solution. So this is very important to keep in mind, the saturation theory. It's also important to keep into account that the more heterogeneity among your participants, the more groups you need in total. So try to make sure that there is a kind of heterogeneity in your work. If you have a homogeneous group, it might be biased towards this group. So heterogeneity will be another aspect to look at, but it depends on this phase of your usability testing. And I need to say here that I am far away from the beta testing. Beta testing is more at the end of the design process, when my solution or product is almost going to the market and going to an end phase. I am talking today about usability, early usability testing. Now, as many sessions as it requires to provide a reliable answer on your research question, it's important to include this number of sessions. It's up to you to see how many iterations you have. Depending on the development, depending on the feedback, you can have several iterations, but I always advise to not have at least 2 or 3 iterations or sessions that allow you to get feedback on your product. Now, continuing on the question, how many users should test my solution? Since we are focusing here on formative approaches, this question is only relevant for summative usability testing, when we do it in a representative way and we want to do representation on a statistic scale. But this question is not important in qualitative usability testing. The better question to pose when you do qualitative usability testing is not to ask how many users did test my solution. It's better to say another question. You should say, are the testers representative of the target users? How many tasks did the users try? How reasonable are the observations? So these are the 3 key questions that you should ask when you do qualitative usability question, and should not focus much on the number of users. Now, there are some criteria that are very useful for a valid usability issue. First of all, the practitioner is representative of the target users. Try to make sure that this is the case. The problem can be clearly described. You need to describe clearly what was the problem that your solution is fixing or trying to facilitate or make it much easier. Also, you have to look at the impact that can be clearly described. What will be the impact of your solution? And this impact need to be described. And definitely a rational account of the cause of the problem can be provided. And in this sense, you can quantify or parameterize your solution and the problem. So it's very important to keep this into account. When you are introducing or developing a solution, you are developing a solution for a problem, and it's very important to identify those variables associated with the problem and how can your solution make it easier or better or faster, more effective, more efficient, or increase the satisfaction while the user is making benefit of your solution. Now, the types of sampling, if you are looking to sampling, you can do non-probability sampling. This is not representative, like I said, and it's not important to be representative, but it's more convenient and it's more economical. You can do convenience, opportunistic sampling. You just select people depending on their availability, people in your contact circle. You can do snowball sampling, asking somebody, and somebody will recommend others. Quota sampling is not recommended here. You can do also purposive sampling, and for sure you can go for probability with random sampling, cluster sampling, and systematic sampling. But what I highlighted in red is the most commonly used sampling technique for qualitative usability testing. When it comes to these techniques in black, those are more used for quantitative usability sampling. Now, something very important, once you selected your users who will test your solution, you must describe them very well in your methodology and in your results. So you need to describe the background and the context of the people in a detailed way and in a very rigorous way to make sure that you are describing the background of those people, and maybe you can be a correlation between their background and between their judgments. So it's important to always contextualize the people and mention who are the people who tested your work and really take time to describe them. Now let's talk about the tasks after finishing talking about users. What are the tasks and the goals that I can do in usability testing? According to ISO 9241, ISO 9241 is giving a kind of process map that shows you that how to plan the human-centered design process. If we are looking to interact or test the interaction between a human and your solution, first of all, you need to understand and specify the context of the use. Then you will need to specify the user requirements. Then you will go to produce the design solution to meet your user requirements. And finally, you come up with the evaluation of the design against requirements. And here comes the usability testing. And as you can see, when we talk about usability testing, it involves iteration where appropriate. And you will keep iterating this process until you come with a design solution that is refined. And we can say here then, according to the ISO language, the design solution meets user requirements. So this circle will keep being iterative until you meet user requirements. And therefore, it's very important from the beginning to understand the context, define these requirements in an empirical way to make sure that you can later measure these requirements and check if your solution met these requirements or not. Following up on the ISO standard, we can see here that it is talking about the steps of usability that you need to take. First of all, you need to plan the tests, recruit the participants, prepare materials, set up the environment, and then conduct your test. This could all be done within the environment of testing. And finally, off this environment, you can start analyzing the data and report your results. Definitely, you can iterate several times, as I mentioned earlier, but once you are done with usability testing, you can start into the analysis. Now, let's go further into detail. ISO 9241 is talking about 3 major usability testing that are helpful to use the usability of the solution and the user experience. And those are the 3 most famous metrics used in user experience and usability testing evaluations. First of all, efficiency. So efficiency here is how fast users can accomplish a task while with the use of an application or a solution. Effectiveness is the accuracy and the completeness with which the users achieve specific goals, the range of error, and so on. And finally, satisfaction is how pleasing the users find the system or the solution that you are proposing. So those are the most three famous metrics used in usability testing and user experience: efficiency, effectiveness, and satisfaction. Now I would like to move to the third part of the presentation, the environment. In which environment should I do my usability testing? This is very important. When we talk about usability testing, it's not only about the measures, whether they are quantitative or qualitative, even though we are focusing today on qualitative measures for usability testing. It's also not only about the measures, but it's also about the context, so the application context. If you already define the task that the user will do, and you know what type of user you have, what is left for you now is the environment. In which environment I will do my testing? Am I going to do testing in a conference room? Am I going to do testing in a lab? Am I going to do testing in real nature? It depends on the situation. So it's very important to define the environment where I will do my testing. And as you can see, this can be an example for an environment where you're taking the testing. Here is the user on the left side. On the right side is the informant or the facilitator. And this can be an ideal environment to test a solution, for example, if it is computer-based, for example. If you are doing a testing for a maquette, a model, a 3D model, or an object, or a product for industrial designers, and so on, you can have different settings. So it's very important to think about the setting where you are going to do your testing, and how this setting should be neutral and should in the same time allow for the testing, because many situations when you do usability testing you can have noise, you can have disruptions, and so on. So make sure that the environment is well thought and chosen when you are doing your testing. In general, there are three types of usability testing: either moderated in person. As you can see, this is moderated in person, so the moderator is involved in the same space or is present in the same space with the user. You can have moderated remotely, so this is a distant testing, or totally unmoderated remote. And the unmoderated remote testing is not recommended at all for usability testing. Less recommended is the moderated remote testing, and the best usability testing is moderated in person, so that you are present with the testers in the space of the testing. And this is my recommendation. So a facilitator here will be located with the participant or in a group, and will be on hand to answer questions and respond to any feedback. To get a genuine result, the test will usually take place in a lab and often unveil more than if you were having a participant undertake a task on their own. So this is very important to look at. Now let's talk about the first metric that the usability testing is looking at: effectiveness. Now, as I mentioned earlier, our ISO standard is focusing on three metrics, but two types of categories. One is the user experience, and this is, we call it the satisfaction, and two metrics on usability. One is called effectiveness and one is called efficiency. So when it comes to effectiveness, according to ISO 9241, we are talking here about a simple metric. It is the completion rate, which is a fundamental usability testing. So a binary measure, the completion rate is a binary measure of pass and fail. It can be coded 1 or 0, and it provides us a simple metric of success. If user cannot complete a task, not much else matter with respect to usability or utility. So it's a very simple approach. Some other people will call it the error of rate. They will just inverse it, and then they will see the range of error, but it is the same metric. So once you want to measure the effectiveness of an application or a solution or a product, just give the people a task and check, did they succeed in completing this task or not? Do they have errors while doing it or not? And you have to document that. So have predefined success criteria. Prior to testing, determine what things must happen to consider a task successful. Focus on the outcome of the task and ask yourself, did the user get the right page, submit the right information? Another question can be also, or another endeavor to look at is, it is not necessarily the path of the completion, but also you can look at how did they complete it. So this is also important. So sometimes you can focus on the rate of success, and sometimes also you see how did they reach this success. So these are all ways to make sure that you are measuring the effectiveness of your solution. Also, context matters. What makes a good task completion rate depends on the context. So past studies or other tests using a similar interface in a similar field can provide guidance on what is acceptable. Because when you are testing a solution for the first time that has no relevant competitors, or there is no other products that are similar to your solution, it will be difficult to assess the success rate. But if you have similar products in the same category of solutions, you can go to the usability testings that are reported or are published and check what was the success rate for this solution and start to compare your own solutions in relation to these studies. Also, the average task completion in general rate is 78% for software and websites. So for example, if we are talking here about a solution that is an application or a software or a website, we're talking here about an average of 78%. From where is this coming? It's mainly coming from a database of almost 1,200 software and website tasks that are tested across several products and domains. Use this rate or compare your task rates with literature according to that. So this is an example for that, and you can see the source is Jeff Saro for that. Also, you can compute a confidence interval. A confidence interval statistically is very simple to compute around the completion rate using the adjusted world confidence. So just use the world confidence interval, and it's accurate for any sample size, especially for small sample size. So I advise you, if you want to go do some statistical analysis to get some more confidence in the testing and in the results, just test the confidence interval and use the world confidence interval. So this is also a good thing or a good idea to work on. This is just an example to give you an idea what is an effective testing results. For example, this was a prototype, an interface that I worked on, I developed for my PhD. I had a first version for prototype 1 and prototype 2, and I asked people to complete task 1 and task 2. They are identical for both prototype, and as you can see, in fact, that in the beginning the response rate was 71%, and then with prototype 2 it became 66%, which means that actually prototype 2 was worse than prototype 1. So this is very informative, was very informative for me as an interface designer or a software designer to go back and say, okay, the first version of the software was better than the second, so I just went back and I continued building on my first prototype, and I abandoned prototype 2. So just from these simple graphs that shows you on the y-axis you can see the successful rate, and on the x-axis you can put your prototype version, you can directly get some information, and in this sense you can have binary success data to test your interface. To ensure a task completion rate is at least 70%, it's always advised to plan a testing at least for 5 to 8 users. Don't go be under the number 5. If all users complete the task, you can conclude with 95% confidence that the completion rate exceeds 70%. And to ensure a 90% completion, you plan on testing a minimum of 30 users. So this is an idea to work on the size of user testers and your sample size. Around 40% of users who fail a task still rated as super easy to do, and this is very important to keep into account. People most probably will not know if they succeeded or failed the task, and if you ask them about the perception, they might tell you that they found it easy. The correlation between task success and task difficulty rating is also around 14%. This means that task rating only predicts around 25% of completion rate, and the explanatory power isn't higher because some users don't know they failed the task and others complete the task but still think it's difficult. So it's very important to keep into account that the correlation between the task success and task difficulty is a very important factor, and always you will have something like 20% of people who did not complete. If you are in the region of 70% successful rate, those people will not be aware about the reason of failure. So keep that into account. Now let's talk about the second metric that you should measure according to the ISO standard, which is related to usability. Here I'm talking about efficiency. And efficiency simply is measured through completion time. So you can measure the time, which is a core usability metric, and the task times can be great for diagnosing usability problems. A long task time is often caused by problems with the interaction with the interface. So there are three core ways to report task times. First of all, the average task completion time, and this includes only users who completed the task successfully, and this is the most common one to report. The second measure is the mean time to failure. So here the average time users are spending on the task before they give up or complete the task incorrectly. And the third parameter can be average time on task, and this is the total duration users are spending on your task. So these are all three core ways to report your task time and report the efficiency of your software. And again, I show you here an example. This was an interface that I developed with a number of users varying up to 19 users, 20 users actually, and these are the time interval. People who completed the task in less than 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, 7 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, and as you can see, the highest majority of people, they completed the task between 5 to 7 minutes. And from here I can measure how efficient is the solution in helping the user in achieving their objective or in completing a task. So the time measure is very useful, and it can be simply with a chronological watch starting to quantify that. Now, when reporting the average task time, use the geometric means for small samples. If you have small samples less than 25%, then you can use the median. Use the geometric mean. But if you are having bigger sample, you can go use the median for larger samples. So this is also interesting when you start to do simple analytical descriptive analysis. Compute a confidence interval around the task time. And the time saved can be an excellent measure of productivity. So showing that a new design can substantially reduce the time it takes users to complete a task is a metric even executives understand. So keep it into account even when you develop an algorithm, a methodology, a software, a model, an equation, a process, a protocol, whatever solution you are going to look at. Always try to take into account the time, the computation time or the interaction or the task completion time as a measure of productivity. And definitely if you quantify a series of tasks on a long time duration and you have a significant short reduction of time dedicated to the completion, this will be considered as an efficiency measure that will increase, will be in favor of your software development or your solution. You can estimate the task time for experienced users who commit no errors. That's also an interesting to look at the people who did not commit errors and estimate the average time of completion, and you can consider this the fastest time to complete a task. And based on that, you can start to do some benchmarking and compare to make sure that a task will take time so long or so shortly, depending on the response. So for efficiency, task time are relative. Don't get hung on what the right task time is. It's not about how many minutes, how many seconds. Just keep it into account that you need to quantify and compare, but don't get fixed on the accurate value of the task completion. It's not a race. At the end, users should have also a kind of a high successful rate and an acceptable completion time. But it's not about making them accomplish the task in the shortest time. This is important. Under-moderated remote times are easily affected by user being distracted by other activities. So as I mentioned earlier, if the environment where you are doing your testing, it has no in-moderated expert, or the moderator is not in the working environment with the people who are using the solution, directly you will have distraction and this will affect the time. So therefore, I was talking earlier about the importance of the environment and the recommendation of having in-space moderated testing. Now, talking about the third and the last metric of usability testing, satisfaction. According to our ISO standard, we're looking here at the fulfillment of needs and how people are satisfied. So it's not only about usability from an efficiency and effectiveness point of view, but also we are looking at user experience. And here comes the combination between usability testing and user experience. According to our ISO 9241, common satisfaction is a measure. And satisfaction can be measured using either multiple items in a questionnaire or only a single item scale. So as you can see, these famous scales with the faces. So satisfaction is a multi-dimensional scale. It can vary 1 to 3, 1 to 5, 1 to 6, 1 to 7, it depends. The system usability scale is a simple 10-item attitude Likert scale test that is giving a global view of subjective assessment of usability. So the system usability scale is a very famous test. I recommend you to use it. It was developed by John Brooke at Digital Equipment Corporation in the UK in 1986, and it's a very famous test that can be done very fastly to measure usability. The system usability scale provides a quick and reliable tool for measuring the usability. It consists of 10-item questionnaire with 5 response options for respondent, from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Originally, I mentioned it was created in the UK, and this is how it looks. You can see it's very simple. You just click, you can do it digitally or paper-based, and you will just ask people to start to fill up the questionnaire. The questions are already preset. You can modify them slightly according to your solution. For example, I think that I would like to use the website frequently. In this sense, the website can be replaced, and you can use the word software, or you use the word application, or my design, or my building, or my prototype, and so on. And you go on with the same replacement in the 10 questions, but as you can see here, it's about how you like it. I found it, the solution, unnecessarily complex. I thought this solution was easy to use. I think that I would need assistance to be able to use this solution. I found the various functions in this solution were very integrated. I thought there was too much inconsistency in this solution. I would imagine that most people would learn to use this solution very quickly. I found the solution very cumbersome, awkward to use. I felt very confident using this solution. I needed to learn a lot of things before I could get going with this solution. You can translate it in the language of the users also. You can do it in whatever language you are testing, but just try to respect this order, try to respect the wording, try to respect the details, the scale, the Likert scale of 5 Likert scale options. Make sure that you are complying with the standards. And the system usability scale has become an industry standard today, with references in over 1,300 articles and publications. So no one today is going to claim to develop a software, a model, a tool, a solution, an application, and is claiming that this software is user-friendly, or is better, or more effective, or more informative when it comes to decision making, without doing a system usability scale testing. It's a very easy scale to administer to participants, and it can be used on small sample size with reliable results, and definitely it is valid, so it can effectively differentiate between usable and unusable systems or solutions. This is another example. In my study, in my PhD, I also used the same system usability scale to test my interface, and people gave different results for that. Another interesting type of questionnaire is the after scenario questionnaire, or the ASQ, which is simply a 3-question scale used to assess how difficult a user provided a task in a usability test. Also, it's developed by Lewis in 1995. This survey is popular because of its simplicity. As you can see, the question is, overall, I'm satisfied with the ease of completing the task in this scenario. And then you can give your evaluation in a Likert scale 1 to 7. So you can test it, and you can find example for the after scenario questionnaire on internet, and you can start to work on it. So it's up to you to use the system usability scale or to use the after scenario questionnaire. I always prefer the system usability scale, but also the after scenario questionnaire can be interesting to use. In general, to conclude the satisfaction part, there is no single best way to measure satisfaction, and you can use other self-reporting questions if you find them more relevant in your domain or in your field or related to your solution. And finally, also, you can include an open-ended section in your questionnaire to get feedback from people on how they used or how they experienced the interface or the solution. And definitely you can do also interviews or more detailed interaction, one-to-one discussions with the users after using your solution to get more insights on your feedback. So this wraps up the presentation. In conclusion, today I presented ISO 9241. I talked about how to select users, how to work on the task and the goals for your interface that you want to test or your solution, what will be the environment that I will do my usability testing in, and finally we talked about effectiveness, efficiency and satisfaction as the 3 major usability testing metrics indicated by the ISO 9241. Some recommendations and conclusions. We focused on few metrics to measure aspects of usability and the user experience based on ISO 9241. This technique is very simple to use. It can be based on simple effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction metrics to promote iteration and make it easy. It will not take a lot of time to do it. The system usability scale and the after scenario questionnaire satisfaction question can give you a good indicator of user interaction, or user satisfaction, at least as a benchmark for optimization. And ISO 9241 is a simple and powerful standard that can help you evaluate a new design methodology, process, interface, software, tool, graphical user interface, or website, so don't hesitate to use it. And for sure, usability testing is not the same as beta testing. User acceptance tests are something else. We are here looking about early human-centered design processes where we want to try to inform the design process by doing simple and fast testing in order to improve and iterate on the development of the solution that we are working on. By that, I terminate my presentation. I would like to invite you to follow up my channel and like the video if you find it interesting. And definitely the video is strongly related to previous presentation within the playlist on qualitative research method. By that, I wrap up my presentation on usability testing. I wish you best of luck, and I hope you can test your interfaces and solutions in the future based on this presentation. Thank you for your attention.